So the video that we're going to do today reminds me of a conversation that I had with another content creator, somebody who is older both in terms of their length of time on the platform and actually older than me, which is very atypical because this platform is full of young bucks that need to be put in their place. And we were talking about enemies and how sometimes you can actually judge somebody by the caliber of people that don't like them, and how we have encountered through our time on these platforms such a group, a collection, a motley crew of low tier, low caliber people that end up not liking us. And that, even when you're getting negative comments from randoms that you can't really judge, more than anything, sometimes can let you know that you're on the right path. Now, the perfect example of this, and it's why I'm leading it off in this introduction, is this guy called the Serf Times or the Serfs Times. I know I said I didn't know it in the last video that I made, but I still have yet to look it up because who the hell cares? The Serfs decided that he was going to make a 51-minute response video to my last response video where I called him out and I shamed him for all of the nonsense that he was doing. However, while he could not respond to any of my points in his video, he ended up proving exactly what I was saying in my video, just in a longer format, so we're going to go over that today, because the Serfs somehow is still incapable of understanding anything that I'm saying, and on top of that, he's projecting stuff that he did onto me and my audience, and it's really weird and it's really creepy, and it's done multiple different times throughout his video. However, before we get into that, before we slice into this good stuff pie, I do want to point out that I got my 100,000 subscriber play button. It's right over there. No, there's not going to be an unboxing video because who cares about an unboxing video? Also, you guys didn't watch my 100K special despite the litany of special guest stars in that video. Shame on you. Now, shame on the Serfs. Let's get into it.
The thing about Actual Justice Warrior is, like, I have had encounters with a lot of people, like right-wing reactionaries on the internet now, and like there are few of them who afterwards have become as obsessed as AJW did. Like, I don't know, like his fans flooded like the debate I had with him, which is like downvoting at comments like AJW bodied you, I can't believe you're ever gonna recover from this, all this kind of stuff.
So I'm leading off with this clip for a very specific reason, because it's an example of what Serfs does throughout the course of this video, which I will be demonstrating to you multiple different times, and it couldn't be more perfect. You see the way that he phrases what supposedly my audience was telling him, that he was bodied, this weird phraseology that the Serfs is off-put by? Now, that might sound really bad, and it might sound like my audience are a big bunch of meanies, but here's the thing. The person who said that they bodied the other person during our debate was the Serfs. Let me play the clip for you.
Because I'm going to continue to body you on this information because you are on the wrong side of history, my dude, when it comes to this.
Now, this isn't an isolated incident. This is just an example of something that the Serfs does throughout the course of this video and has been doing throughout the course of him running his mouth about me since I schooled him in our debate. He will say something ridiculous, or he will have said something ridiculous during the course of our debate. People will make fun of him, and then all of a sudden, because I haven't been talking about him, because who cares about the Serfs, he will say that I or my audience is responsible for the thing that came out of his mouth. Perfect example of it right there, just a minute into his own video about me. Him lying and projecting something he did onto my audience. But it goes further than that, because the Serfs also keeps talking about how I have been obsessing over something called condom theory for the last 9 months in between our debate and the time that I made my video response to him. But what's really interesting is that the Serfs has no clips at all whatsoever of me doing so, because those clips do not exist, because after our debate, I didn't bother with the Serfs anymore. I just let him go, and he went on multiple different programs as laid out in my previous video and was trash talking me. And unlike the Serfs, I have the clips to support what I'm saying.
But we did end up having some debatey baits, and you know, for better or for worse, we got to learn some things about the wonderful world of race realism. Actual Justice Warrior is a race realist, by the way. Sean Fitzgerald is similar. He's also a race realist. He likes to blame a lot of the problems that happen to the black community on things that aren't aren't real, such as the fact that he thinks they wear condoms less, and that's why there's so many black families that grow up without fathers. That's an actual thing he said in a debate I had with him, that the reason for that is because they don't wear condoms. Super pseudoscientific racist nonsense, which turns out not even to bear fruit.
So Lance, I know that you're a coward and you might be too afraid to watch this video in front of your audience, but if I'm the one who's been obsessed, if I'm the one who wouldn't stop talking about this over the course of 9 months, then why do I have clips of you doing so during this period, but you have no clips of me doing so? And if you have clips, pause this video and dig them up right now, and not clips from my previous video response where after letting it go for 9 months, I finally decided to take you down a peg. Clips from the period of which you are talking about me being obsessed about this. I'll wait. Now we're gonna come back to the serfs doing stuff like this or similar stuff like this, rest assured, but I want to go to another point in this video that I found absolutely insane, and of course it was gobbled up by his audience because, as I've said many times on this platform, anytime you see a creator and you feel like to yourself internally that they might be too dumb to have an audience, just remember they are speaking to people that are dumber than them. When we know, throughout looking at any major city, that disparities between population and crime are the norm, not the exception. Remember, New York City's population is around 40 to 50% Hispanic or Black, but if you go to the shooting stats from any given year in the past 20 years, you will find not one single year where they represent less than 90%.
This is where it gets 1350. It didn't take long. It didn't take very long, but now we're in 1350. Now, the problem with 1350 and why it's ridiculous, right, is it's the way people are interpreting data.
So right here, I made a point specifically about how disproportionate outcomes in the criminal justice system are not atypical. People do different behaviors at different times, and when you slice them up into demographics, the idea that you're going to get a perfect pie of representation in any field at all whatsoever is a little bit ridiculous. And the exact stat that I cited was the NYPD stats on shootings in the city of New York over the past 20 years. Now, I specifically said about 50%, a little less than 50% of the populations, which would be blacks or Hispanics, are responsible in any given year for never less than 94% of the shootings. And I cited the NYPD crime data, so you can go through any given year, and you'll see that every single year it's between 94 and 97%. And the serf's response to this, like the NPC that he is, by saying that I'm 1350ing, even though 1350 is a reference to national homicide statistics, not local crime in New York City. Remember, New York City's population is around 40 to 50% Hispanic or Black, but if you go to the shooting stats from any given year in the past 20 years, you will find not one single year where they represent less than 90%.
This is where it gets 1350.
This is unbelievable peak ignorance by an individual. This is somebody who cannot comprehend anything related to a criminal justice conversation beyond the idiotic talking points that he gets from other creators. Again, not understanding when I'm referencing specific data that doesn't even line up to 13% commit 50% of the homicides is absolutely ridiculous, but this is just inserted in Serf's video as if it is a valid counterpoint to the point I was making. By the way, he missed the overall point that I was making, that disproportionate outcomes in the criminal justice system, as in any area in human society at any given point in time ever, are not necessarily down to racism. He completely blew past that by responding to my stats that he was uncomfortable by just saying 1350, I'm the serfs. Now at the time, I thought the serfs understood what I was saying, and I think the part where he may have gotten tripped up is later in the conversation where I pointed out, well, you are asserting that there is racism against black people, you are expressing support for a movement called Black Lives Matter, I am talking about black crime, so we understand to a certain extent what these categories mean for the purposes of this conversation, so it's really weird 30 minutes in or whenever he brought it up for him to say that these things don't exist, but then to go on and talk about anti-black racism in the United States of America specifically.
Oh, they still don't get it. Okay, so hey, by the way, if I bring up something like we've invented a social construct, that doesn't change the way society sees us. I'm identifying both problems. Like, people are still black when they leave the house in the way society perceives them.
But it gets even more ridiculous than that, because there was another point that I made in my video that should have been a clarification for somebody like the serfs, who obviously was incapable of following what I was saying during a debate. and yet he completely misunderstood that yet again, and then he acted like I missed his point, which was absolutely ridiculous. And this was on the topic of race realism. Now, I understand why the Serfs is lying to his audience about my position on this, because he thinks if he calls me a race realist, then that will debunk everything that I say, and it prevents him from being exposed for his lack of argumentation. Now, the way that this dispute came about in our previous video, which was our live debate, was when I pointed out to the Serfs that it made no sense to point out that the distinctions between racial groups are not scientific when we both know what we're discussing when we're talking about those demographics. Now, the context of this was that the Serfs was constantly asserting racism, racism, racism over and over and over again, but then when I brought up the crime stats by demographics, all of a sudden he was like, well, those demographics don't actually exist. Now, this doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever, and this is not me saying that there's a hard line between the racial groups in this country. The point I'm trying to make is that we both understand what we're talking about when we refer to racial groups. So as long as we have that understanding, we can talk about racism or potential racism against minorities, and we can talk about minority crime because we understand the parameters of that discussion. The Serfs took that and he assumed that I was saying that he can't say race doesn't exist and assert racism, which is something that I did not say. I understand the social construct that he was saying. In fact, he was using one of my examples that I said in my video to explain how it was a social construct to refute me by saying it was a social construct. To paraphrase a little bit, is that there are no hard lines between racial or ethnic groups in the way that we classify them. Perfect example of this is Barack Obama, who's half black and half white, yet we consider him black just based on his appearance, even though he is equal parts both.
Like rational. Like, why is Barack Obama black when he's half black and half white?
It is demonstrative of the person that I'm talking about's weakness that I have to go through this over and over and over again just so he can understand what I'm saying, even though it's pretty obvious that he's deliberately misconstruing my position because he has no argument against my position. Now, let's move on to the condom theory portion of the video, aka the Serf's most ridiculous point that he's ever tried to make against me. And we're going to start with the Serfs accusing me of moving the goalposts, which is yet another demonstration of him not knowing what he's talking about.
People are getting pregnant before they graduate high school, like a bunch of reasons.
No, but why is that happening to black households? Why do black households have that high rate?
I mean, you have the breakdown of the family. You have a bunch of different factors. We set up a system where women are incentivized to not marry the father of their kid. Black people, on average, are less likely to use condoms, so they're more likely to have unplanned pregnancies. Like, again, there's a bunch of things that are leading to this, and this is a long-term trend. It's been happening, I think, since the 60s.
And eventually we got to that part where he was like, I don't know, they don't use condoms. And yeah, that's very, very weird. And now he's goalposting, as he often does, right? This is like, again, if you want to talk about debate tactics, this is one of the things that he's in the middle of doing. Because now he's adding, well, okay, I've got a new criteria. It's also amongst high school students. So I want to add that to the mix, all right? I want to add that to the fray. High school black kids are the ones who don't use condoms. That's why, because that's also the only time when a family can ever be started is basically when you're in high school.
Now, I've seen audiences have the wool pulled over their eyes multiple different times in multiple different scenarios. But for the Serfs to accuse me of moving the goalpost when I am playing a clip from our original conversation and pointing to what I originally said is absolutely ridiculous. And if you don't believe me that high school portion of the clip is from our original conversation, I will link the Serf's video on his channel where I called into his channel so you can see it for yourself. And I will link the video that I was responding to where the Serfs went out of his way to download the stream, cut out that specific clip, and then make ridiculous counter arguments that didn't stand up to scrutiny against that clip. I hate to break it to you, Lance, but it's all on video, it's all there for the world to see, and you can't assert moving the goalpost when it's in the original clip, and all you've done, because once again you're projecting your nonsense onto me, is move the goalpost repeatedly time after time. By the way, I noticed that in this 51-minute video, Lance cut out everything related to the gay black men, which he brought up in his original response to me, which was a discussion about teen pregnancy, because Lance doesn't understand anatomy apparently. Also, Lance decided to double down on a study that I refuted in my video.
A higher percentage of unmarried, non-Hispanic, black men use the male condom compared with Hispanic and non-Hispanic white men
than their white counterparts. Now, as addressed multiple different times and is in the article that Lance has referenced and in my video, in the article that I referenced, the reason for this disparity is because older black men use condoms more because they are less likely to be married once they get north of 40. This is in the article and in the studies that Lance is citing to prove this point and has nothing to do with teenage pregnancy. This is why I reference the CDC data time after time. Now, typically when talking about this topic, I reference this CDC data, which covers a wide age range, wider than I'd like, but it tells you in the data, if you actually bother to read it, which methods of contraception skew older as opposed to younger. And in this, you can see a disparity in condom use, but I've noted multiple different times that according to this chart, the most statistically significant disparity is actually in the pill. Now, while you can easily draw your own conclusions from the charts presented during my debate, or, use basic logic if you have higher instances of teenage pregnancy, obviously that means you're either more sexually active at younger ages or using contraception less when you are sexually active, etc., etc. I'm always on the lookout for data that better supports my position. And unfortunately for Lance, the CDC just released a survey of 2019 teens that only covers the ages 15 to 19 that completely decimates any worthless points that he's ever tried to attempt to make against me on these subjects. Now, I will link this in full in the description because I actually cite the sources that I present in my videos and don't just randomly spout out at the mouth about random things that my opponent never said, just so Lance can read it for himself on stream and enjoy the humiliation in front of his own audience. But if you go to this specific section, the section that refers to no contraceptive method used, you get some interesting percentages, and I'm going to play that right now for Lance. In contrast with sex and grade, not using a pregnancy prevention method differed by race/ethnicity. A higher prevalence of no method among Black, 23.2%, and Hispanic, 12.8% students, compared with white students at 6.8%. So what this says, clearly and unambiguously, irrefutable and indisputably, is that among sexually active teens, which this is obvious if you just looked at the teen pregnancy rates, the prevalence of not using any contraceptive method at all whatsoever is between 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 times for Black students. Period. End of sentence. Full stop. Lance, shut your mouth. You're done.
If we get to the root of this, if you really want to die on this hill, even if this was the case, even if it turns out that statistically Black people use condoms less than white people, what the fuck does that have to do with the end result being, and that's why more Black people commit murders in the United States. That's why they disproportionately commit more murders than white people. But because again, it comes down to the condoms. It's that. It's the formation of the family unit based on the condoms. It all stems, it's always been the condoms. You must understand that's been the root of all of this. Historic racism, systemic racism, critical race theory, all these things. None of it is true. None of it. Slavery, not true. It all comes down to the core. It's about the core, the condom, all right? It's always been about the condom.
Now, while Lance is done, yet again humiliated by me in video format, I'm not done with him because this whole conversation, this whole tangent, is a total distraction. And it's a distraction that Lance is trying to use to better obfuscate my position, and I'm not going to let that slide. I'm going to hold him accountable. Because the entire point of us getting onto the topic of teenage condom use was the discussion about fatherlessness in the Black community, and Lance asked me for a reason why, potentially, that there's higher rates of fatherlessness in the Black community. And I cited as a potential example, maybe they're getting pregnant younger because people who have children younger are less likely to stay together over the long term. And then he asked me why they were getting pregnant at younger ages. And I cited possible lack of use of contraception. Now, this turned out to be true, but again, he's trying to say that all of that lead up didn't happen and that I'm saying that less condom use equals more crime, when again, that's not what I said, that's not what I've ever said. I was tying it back to fatherlessness, which possibly is another topic that Lance is completely uncomfortable talking about. Now again, this isn't me moving the goalposts, changing what happened after the fact because I'm afraid of what I said in the past. I have a clip of me mentioning this and how we got there from our original conversation when I called into his show pre-debate.
But then why in that where they don't, why is it that Black people are disproportionately, in your opinion, committing more crimes?
Because they are.
They just are.
I mean, you have, what, Like, you have lack of police presence in certain areas, hyped gang culture, you have fatherless households, like whatever you want to run through.
Mhm.
But they
But
are.
then my question again would be the same thing then. Why does
And
that not
again,
affect
there's
the white demographic of that same population the same way?
because they don't have the same issues as the black population in terms of fatherless households. It's significantly higher among black communities than it is among white communities.
So the cause is fatherless households then.
I mean, that is a huge predictor of whether or not you will end up in poverty and whether or not you will end up involved in crime. Yes, a male role model makes a huge difference, especially since your peak offending years as are when you're a young man aged 14 or 15 to 25.
So again, I'll ask the question, Lance, why do you have to lie constantly about what happened in our conversation? How come I'm able to produce the clips to back up what I said in the past and all the way to now, but you don't produce any clips, you just assert it and laugh like an idiot into the camera? Where is your evidence that I was asserting that condoms cause crime? I'll wait for it, Lance.
This is about why is there a disproportionate amount of black men overrepresented both in murder statistics and in prison itself. That was really at the core of everything we were talking about. And then he went into condom theory, which again, extremely weird, very, very weird. I have not, outside of Actual Justice Warrior, heard condom theory before, but I'll add it to the list of strange race realism that there is.
And finally, I want to close by addressing the vulgarity presented by Lance throughout the course of this video, because I find it absolutely fascinating what you can get away with saying if you're hiding behind the veneer of virtue or progressivism.
It does look like he gives these speeches while he's jerking off. You are the diaper porn of people. Like, I'm serious. You are the personal equivalent of diaper porn. I'm sorry. I'm going to get in trouble for the whole kink shaming thing. Everyone's going to be like, Lance, why aren't you being sex positive? I'm just putting it out there. Do one correction about that segment we did yesterday on Actual Justice Warrior and his obsession with black people's condom use and their penises.
The reason we're circling back to this is to talk about what I mentioned in the beginning of this video. These are low caliber people. They're not principled. They're not honorable. These are people who are progressives and do progressive content on the internet because they want virtue points. They're about as shallow as a standing shower. There's absolutely nothing to them. That's why they're always talking about the mass slipping on all their political opponents, because they know that the face that they put out in the public isn't their real self. And if you ever got a peek at that, you wouldn't want to be around them. But hey, those are just my thoughts and my analysis, 100% accurate as usual, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, you know what to do. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. They're linked in the description of this video. Support me via the support links. Thank you again for 100K. The plaque is awesome. Really appreciate it. Till next time.